And a good football Monday, Birds fans. Part of week 2 of the National Football League year and the end of week 1. Not great. That's what we're here to talk about for the next couple hours on Birds 365 with two good guests coming your way. You got Mac and Mac, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. JM, when you and I parted ways on Friday, I think we would have said the Eagles had a pretty good week, up and down, some surprisingly good signings, a couple of losses. All in all, pretty darn good for a team trying to defend its NFC championship. Ended on a sour note if you take Sunday as the end of a week and Monday, the beginning of the week, with two big defections yesterday. Isaac Seumalo signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then last night, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson landing in Detroit on a one-year deal. We're going to analyze it all, both good and bad, but going in reverse order. Two pretty significant losses. One, I think we expected Isaac Seumalo, but one, most people had pretty high level of confidence they'd be able to get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back. How bad was yesterday's losses for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it's as bad as people think. I think the market told you, what you needed to know about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Not just the Eagles, everybody else. I think that's important. Isaac is a player I think is in the conversation to be the most underrated player on the team. But they were kind of, understood they were moving on. So that was in the plan, so to speak. Now
would you really say Chauncey Gardner was planning to move on, or a guy they
No. The Eagles wanted CJ back, but and they offered him a multi-year deal early in the process. That was not up to what he thought he was going to get on the market. And it turns out the Eagles were right and he was wrong. So the Eagles went in a different direction. What happened was they wanted to get two of the three defensive backs back. And I think when it started, the plan was we'll get CJ back, we'll get Slay back because Slay was under contract. We'll be able to rework his deal. And Bradbury's going to go because Bradbury's going to get too much money. And then ultimately Bradbury was open, which was a little bit of a surprise, to be honest, because all year he talked about he wanted to be back, but he wanted, he was going to take the most money, essentially. And it turns out he didn't take the most money. He took a little bit less to come back. So, Howie's good with contingencies. So, CJ didn't take the deal. He went in a different direction. And then I think the plan was, all right, we're going to get Bradbury back and we're going to get CJ back. And that's when you saw all the Slay stuff sort of develop about him getting released. And then, his agent went out there and said, well, probably not going to do as well on the open market as you think. You like it here. You're a team captain. You're a team leader. And all of a sudden he was amendable to be coming back. And then you got both corners back. And, at that point, the door was essentially shut for Gardner-Johnson in Philadelphia. So I guess the bigger estimation is now there's a tweet out there from his agency and his agent about contracts, about 1-year deals versus 3-year deals. And I haven't been able to confirm that was the actual offer from the Eagles. I do know they offered him a 3-year deal. The one they put on Twitter is pretty light, and it's understandable why he wouldn't have taken that deal. But he's an interesting player, Jody. He really is, because I think the splash plays kind of, discombobulated everything. And that's where I bring up the rest of the league. I mean, it is what it is. His deal he got is the deal he got. I talk a lot about how many teams run the Fangio scheme, and there's too many of them. I think it was 12 or 13 last year. But 12 or 13 is 12 or 13. That means there's 19 or 20 that don't. And they're looking for more traditional safety. So right there, you're kind of squeezing the number down a little bit from somebody who would want that type of player at safety. So most teams probably look at him as still a nickelback, and nickelbacks make top tier nickelbacks make about $8 million a year. That's what they make. That's not, even though I disagree with it, that's not as high value a position to say outside corner or even safety. So that's part of it. A lot of people didn't like when I brought up the personality part of it last week on the show, but that's a big stinking part of it. Now you've seen it from
that was what
17 other stinking reporters. So I'm accepting apologies I never get on Twitter, but that's a part of it as well. That's no doubt that's a part of it. And it is what it is. And he took a 1-year deal to get back on the market, and he went to people that are familiar with him. And Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn, and they were in New Orleans with them. They probably feel a little bit more comfortable than other teams, and hopefully he can play well, get back on the market, and get the deal he's looking for. But the deal he was looking for was not out there. It was not out there.
Agree. Surely agree on that end. And John, I agree with you about the big personality thing. Fans don't have to deal with it. Fans don't know what goes on behind closed doors. You know better than me and better than all the other fans as to how much work a team has to put into coaching a guy who's running his mouth all the time, which Chauncey Gardner is. And yes, sometimes the talent just overwhelms that you say, we got to put up whatever we got to put up with. This guy's just too valuable, too important to our team. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson didn't rise to that level, and that's why he's now an ex-Eagle. So it is, like you just said, it is what it is, and the Eagles now have to fill a void in their defensive secondary. And I'll go back to one that I said last week, and I know what your response was, and I'll just double down on it. They missed out on an opportunity to get a starting safety when Chuck Clark got traded from the Ravens to the Jets for a 7th-round pick. Now, I know you told me last week, yeah, but Jody's not really a fit. That's not what the Eagles are looking for out of their safeties. Okay, so he's not a perfect fit. You're right. His strength is more playing the run, and the Eagles lean a little bit more heavy in the Fangio system about the ability to play the pass. He's not terrible playing the pass. It's just not his strength. Who's going to be the Eagles starting safeties going into the year? At some point, they're going to have to fill in the void that is Marcus Epps and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Reed Blankenship played solidly for the 4 or 5 games that he had to fill in last year. One like, oh my God, we've got our safety for the next 6 years here in Philadelphia with Reed Blankenship. Are we going back to Andre Sacheret? I understand there's a draft to come. There are some free agents still left out there on the open market, none of which jump off the page to me, none of which are as good football players as Chuck Clark. Who's going to be the Eagles starting safeties come September, John?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to bring people in. They're probably going to bring in a free agent, obviously a 2nd-tier free agent at this stage. They're going to probably draft a safety, and we'll see. I mean, one thing I've looked at, and if you want to go outside the box, it was a very short sample size, but turned Avonte Maddox into a full-time hybrid player. Now, my concern is that, in other words, he plays the slot when you have a slot on the field, but he moved back to safety. And Chauncey did it a little bit as well. And it worked both times really well. Avonte did it when CJ was injured. CJ did it when Avonte was injured. Now, the problem, the good part of that is you get a really good player on the field 100% of the time. When you don't have 3 cornerbacks on the field, you have safeties on the field, you keep Avonte on the field. Now, he also played 9 games because he couldn't hold up. So what are the odds he's going to hold up playing Marcus Epps level of snaps?
Yeah.
So that's a legit concern. But from a playing standpoint, I think that would work really well because Avonte's proven he can do it. He can handle it both from a mental standpoint, in a playmaking standpoint, and he's a really good player. I'm not saying they're going to do it. I'm saying that's something I would look at because you're keeping one of your best players on the field and you're better if he can do it. if he can hold up physically for 100%, you're actually better because he's a better football player. Now, I say that, I don't think they're going to do it. And they're going to bring in a safety, a traditional safety, and might be the draft, might be phase 2. So, but remember last year we went through the entire offseason and it was going to be Marcus Epps, and it turned out to be Marcus. And they probably like to have Marcus back now, but that ship has sailed. And, it was going to be Anthony Harris the entire offseason. And Anthony didn't even play this year for the Eagles because they got CJ August 30th, and they drafted Reed Blankenship, and he, sort of bowled out in training camp. So right now it's to be determined. We don't know, but they're going to bring in young bodies. They're going to bring in people to play the position. I mean, how much did we talk on this show about stinking Jaquaski Tart?
The best safety in Eagle camp last year, according to some on our stream here on Birds 365.
Yeah. How much time?
Oh, by the way, I believe Jaquaski still available.
Yeah, still available.
If they'd like to double back on that one, I think you can sign him tomorrow.
Yeah, you can bring him back. So my point is, it's March. What is it, Jody? March, first 20th. Day of spring, March 20th. There's a long time. There's a long time, and it's not going to be Reed Blankenship and Kayvon Wallace. Although I do hope, I do think, Reed played enough to where he played a lot and he played well because of the injuries. And I know it's hard to count on an undrafted guy. How many times we talk about pedigree as well?
Yeah, I don't give a flying fart about pedigree.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the guy played, I'm looking it up real quick. He played 340 snaps. So it's not like it's nothing. It's not a large sample size, but it's not like it's nothing.
True.
And he was a top 10 safety in the NFL, according to PFF. Top 10. Reed Blankenship. That's how well CJ was. CJ was in the 50s. So I do think there is some hope that Reed Blankenship is a find, but they're going to bring in other bodies.
And one of the ones that just got mentioned, and Tommy Lawler from EaglesBlitz.com is going to be our first guest. He'll join us in 5 or 7 minutes. One name that did get mentioned over the weekend, understandably so, is the return of the Green Goblin. Any interest there? I have mixed emotions about whether Jalen Mills would be a fit back here with the Eagles. What do you say?
No, I mean, there could be worse things in the world. Jalen's a great leader, a good teammate, but I think you want to explore the avenues of being better from a coverage standpoint than that. He does have some versatility. There be worse things in the world. Like I said, he's a tremendous, tremendous locker room guy. So I think they'll explore other avenues, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I will say that. He's limited.
Here's the thing that scares me about Jalen Mills. And when he was here the first time, part of the championship team, I was a big fan. And I thought that the Eagle fan base way over complained about the fact that he'd get beat for a long touchdown every once in a while. He was, much like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a playmaker who liked to cheat in, who liked to try and make a pick, who liked to every once in a while take a chance and then pay a price as the ball would go over his head into the end zone. And I thought that they way overstated that. And I thought he was a much better cover corner than most of Eagle Nation gave him credit for. Here's my issue. And I know the Patriots weren't all that good. Haven't been good since that Brady guy left. Maybe Belichick has lost a little bit on his fastball, but they're not a dumb organization. They haven't been for 20 years. And I don't think they became dumb just because Tom Brady left. Jason McCourty just retired last week. And they're losing one of their key contributors at the safety position. And they had Jalen Mills on the roster under contract, the guy who had played safety for the Eagles. They chose to move to corner. Rather than even try him out at safety, they just said, yeah, no, we're moving on. If they had released Jalen Mills because his contract was what his contract was, their cap management said, yeah, not worth the investment. Okay, fine. But you lose one of your starting players who decides to retire on you. You got a guy who's played the position before, and you go, yeah, he's not a safety. Yeah, we were going to release him, so we're going to release him anyway. That scares me a little bit. If Belichick was so dead set against putting him back at safety position, if the Eagles are looking to do the same, I'm not saying they can't coach him up and get him back to safety ready, but that does throw a red flag out there for me. How about you?
I mean, somewhat. I mean, it's an average player. He had a big number. He signed a pretty big deal with the Patriots. So, would they have considered him at the veteran minimum versus whatever it was going to be, 5-6 million, whatever? You never know. Like I said, he'd be far down on the list, but you got to get somebody. So you're in phase 2 now, and you're picking through the remnants, and so there are no splashy players at this point. I mean, that might be it. CJ Gardner-Johnson and Isaac Seumalo. I was surprised Isaac got 3 years. I was surprised it was left for him from Pittsburgh. And CJ obviously got 1 year. Everybody's budgeted at this point, Jody. I mean, everybody acts quickly. The budgets are out there. Now we're in phase 2 where you have these 1-year deals, a lot of veteran minimum deals, a lot of 1 year for $5 million if you're more of a expected contributor. So that's what you're talking about now. And you try to make, and the Eagles have done well in this in the past. And like I said, where Howie kind of sets himself apart in free agency and just as a general manager in general is the contingencies. I think other GMs fall apart when their original plans don't work out, and nobody's original plan works out perfectly. Doesn't work like that. You're going against 31 other teams. He's really good with contingencies. So we'll see how he handles it, but they're going to bring in players. No question about it.
He's going to have some contingency plans because as of right now, he's lost both starting safeties and both starting linebackers. And the only guy on the roster, well, 2 guys, Nakobe Dean, and I'll buy you Reed Blankenship if he was a top 10 rated safety. I don't think you can make him a given, but that's a pretty strong.
Well, that's not from me. That's from PFF. And it's a small sample size.
Do you agree with their rating?
I don't think he's a top 10 safety, but I think he played well in a limited sample size. But it wasn't a really small sample. He played quite a bit because of all the injuries. So that gives me some hope because he didn't get, we can talk about when he got ran over at the goal line, but he didn't really get exposed all that much. And you're talking about, I mean, Philadelphia's a tough market. You get beat once and you're terrible. You brought it up with Jalen Mills. Everybody gets beat. Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay gets. Remember, Slay got upset because people are throwing him under the bus. People are throwing Isaac under the bus when he leaves. Now people will throw CJ under the bus. But that's just the way it is. It's a tough market. Everybody gets beat in the NFL if you're a defensive back. So I thought he played well, and I think it's worthy to say he might be one of the answers at safety.
It is always does make me smile and or laugh when I see when a guy signs with another team. He's just a guy. Okay, and you're going to get somebody more than just a guy to replace him. Like, who would that be? Well, I don't know, but we'll get somebody who's more than just a guy.
Isaac played between 2 Hall of Famers. I got that a million times, which he did, but he was also pretty good himself.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are the Mac and Mac guys on Birds 365. Going to add a new voice to the mix. He jumps on with us from time to time whenever he does. Always adds insight. I read his EagleBlitz.com column all the times. Had a lot of opinions about what the Eagles have and haven't done so far in free agency. He'll share them with us next year on Birds 365. Tommy Lawler from EagleSplits.com up next.